What's going on YouTube? So ahead of BT6 for Digimon TCG, they've been releasing a lot of the new cards and a lot of the new archetypes, kind of in chunks, which is really cool. And one of the ones that they released a couple cards early on, and then finally just got to releasing the rest of the archetype are the all white Eosmon decks. And this deck has some weird stuff in it. It kind of bends the rules of Digimon a little bit, but hopefully in a fun way. But I want to talk about them today. Let's take a look at some of the cards, and I guess I'll tell you guys my thoughts, and we can kind of go over them together. So for the archetype, it's mostly green-white. It's a green-white archetype, but mostly white in this case. But the first card is going to be called Morphomon, who you can see on the screen right there. The effect is, well, on delete, open the top 5 cards of your deck, and then if you have, you know, a Minoa Bellucci, who's a tamer card, or Digimon with Eosmon in its name, add them to your hand. It's pretty straightforward for any sort of, you know, archetype that they released so far in Digimon. There's always like one searcher in the deck. Next up, we've got level 4 Eosmon. So this is where things change a little bit. So level 4 Eosmon, 4/2, not a bad cost line. But what you really want is the effect of playing it raw. So if you play it raw, then you can play a level 4, or excuse me, a cost 4 or lower tamer from your hand without paying its cost. But your opponent also gets to play one from their hand if they have one. If they don't have one, then it's just free advantage for you. But if they do have one, then you're both basically giving your opponent a free tamer. But hold on. I know that sounds crazy, but it's actually not that bad. It might actually be pretty decent for you in the long run. We'll talk about it in a second. Don't worry. Also, on inheritance, you can play a level 4 cost level. Excuse me. You can editor my bad. Also, on inheritance, you can play a 4 cost or lower tamer from your hand without paying its cost. This one, your opponent doesn't get the effect, so that's all for you. Next up, you got your level 5 Eosmons. This is the card that's kind of head scratchy, because its first effect is, in Japanese it reads, you can have up to 50 copies of this card in your deck. For folks who don't know, Digimon is a game where you know, the deck has to be 50 cards. So you could have an entire deck of just this card right here. Luckily, it's a common card, so it's going to be pretty easy to pick up. But at 50 copies in your deck, I mean, that means you have, the sky's the limit. You could run all of the entire deck with this guy. You can run a couple cards. I think finally the balance here is going to be important. Anyway, the more important effects, you can play one level 5 or lower Eosmon from your hand at no cost whenever it attacks. So what you can do is play this card, attack with it, and play another copy of that card immediately. And then on your turn, on inheritance, it gets 1,000 DP, or plus 1,000 DP. It seems like really reminiscent of Diabortomon, being able to just like make a bunch of copies of itself on the board. Let's move on though. I think that once we get to the top end of the cards here, you'll see why it's a little bit different. Anyway, we covered the level 5s. The level 6 Eosmon, kind of heavy on evolve. 5 costs from white or green. On evolve though, whenever you digivolve the Digimon, for each tamer you and your opponent have on the field, you place one level 5 or lower Eosmon from your trash into this Digimon's Digivolution sources. Remember before when we were putting a Digimon into, or excuse me, we were putting a tamer card from both players' hands to the field? This is where you get the advantage of your opponent actually playing a tamer. And then for every 2 cards you add to this card's sources by its own effect, you can delete 1 Digimon your opponent has. Additionally, for this card's effect, if you add 2 or more cards to its sources by its own effect, then you could delete one of your opponent's Digimon. So a little bit of removal, and then you also build that huge tower of Eosmons, who potentially, because level 5s gives you plus 1,000 DP, you know, if you have a bunch of those, then your level 6 Eosmon just gets really, really buff. Additionally, on your turn, for every 3 Digivolution sources this card has, it gains security tag plus 1. Which is really cool because that means that the longer the game goes on and the more level 6 Eosmons you get out, the bigger the tower gets, right? So first Eosmon you drop, maybe you get plus 1 security tag. The second one you get plus 2 or plus 3. And then the last one is probably like plus 4, plus 5, and you can just close the game out right there. So the deck does have a bit of support for its own archetype in a couple of tamers and options. Let's take a look at the tamer first off, which is the newly introduced one called Minoa Bellucci, who at the start of your turn, if you have less than 3 memory, go to 3 memory, which, like most other colored tamers who do this, is a really good effect. You always want to be able to get at least 3 memory per turn, so you can make some pretty impactful plays. Also on your turn, when you play an Eosmon, you can rest as tamer and look at the top 3 cards of your deck. and then among them you can add a Tamer card and one Eosmon to your hand, and then put the rest at the bottom in any order. The thing is, if all the Digimon in the deck are named Eosmon because of Homeboy here, then yeah, not a problem at all. You can pretty much grab any card in the deck that you want. And additionally, on your opponent's turn, if you have a Digimon named Eosmon, all of your opponent's Tamers may not unsuspend during your opponent's unsuspend phase. This is super big. This effect locks out a lot of other effects in the game. You technically lock out like half the good Tamer effects in the game. You know, Agumon and Garurumon decks or Gabumon decks that rely on Nokia don't function anymore. A bunch of effects that, you know, remove cards' Digivolution sources don't work anymore. Green can't cycle through their eggs faster anymore. So the Manoa Bellucci is actually really strong. That secondary effect is pretty scary. And then, like all other Tamers, being able to play it on security without paying its effect is pretty standard. Let's take a look at some of the options for the deck. And the only one they've released so far, and probably will be the only of the archetype, is Cutting Edge. So basically, you can play level 5 or lower Eosmon from your hand without paying its cost. And then after that, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with DP equal to or lower than that Digimon's DP. From the, you can basically delete one of your opponent's Digimon with DP equals or lower to the Digimon whose DP was played by this card's effect. Wow, that was hard! And so that basically means you can get rid of Digimon who have either, not that one, level 5 or lower, right? 6,000 or 4,000. So this is 6,000 is good because it gets rid of blockers. 4,000 just gets rid of rookies, which is not bad. If there's a really annoying rookie on the board with a good effect, you can just remove it outright. So yeah, Cutting Edge is not bad. And then of course the security effect is activate its main effect. So check on security. It's a great defensive card. Also, shout out to the artwork of Diaboromon just getting like cut in half. That's wow. And finally, there's one last card that I think should be included in this archetype, even though it's technically already available in BT5. And that is the card that's already released, Takumi Aiba. So why is this card good? A couple reasons. The deck is focused on building up to your really big Eosmon. And because of that, you're probably going to lose out to aggro decks. So including a couple of Takumi Aibas to force your opponent to spend memory every time one of their level 3 attacks. Or, you know, they try to, go rookie rush on you and just play a bunch of little dudes. They have to pay a cost for that now. They lose value there that way. Additionally, anytime you Digivolve, you're going to be getting more card draw off of Takumi Aiba. If you guys don't know, Obama's been running just two copies of this card in his green deck, and he's almost decked himself out in a couple of games. So yeah, just being able to get like +2 or plus 1 extra draw every single turn on a Digivolve is really, really good. You can cycle through your entire deck incredibly fast. And that's pretty much the archetype. Again, Eosmon, I'm definitely going to give it a shot when BT6 comes out. I've got to find my 50 copies of level 5 Eosmon, though. That's gonna be pretty tough, I think. But yeah, let me know your thoughts below. Are there any of the cards you think that you would include in the deck? Are there any cards you think that we shouldn't include? Are there any text that you would put in from BT5? Yeah, let me know your thoughts. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Somebody tell me that was like 10 minutes long, right? My editor will love me. I know it. 17 minutes? Well, I'm paying them, so it's fine. All right.